Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a situation that is unfolding with alarming speed. A crisis that has pushed one of the Middle East's biggest cities to the edge. This is the story behind Iran's accelerating water meltdown. A disaster that has now hit the capital, Tehran, with full force. Reservoirs that once kept millions supplied are running dangerously low, and the city has entered an emergency that officials are calling unprecedented. In this video, we break down what happened, why it's happening now, and what it means for Iran's future as Tehran faces a reality many thought would never arrive: empty reservoirs city, wide restrictions, and a population suddenly confronting the harsh limits of a changing climate and decades of mismanagement. For years, experts warned that Iran was moving toward a major water crisis. The signs were there: shrinking lakes, disappearing rivers, and groundwater being pumped far faster than nature could replace it. But for ordinary people in Tehran, the situation felt distant, almost theoretical. Water still flowed from taps, and reservoirs around the Alborz Mountains looked full enough from a distance. It wasn't until this year that the scale of the problem hit home. Now the city is seeing steep cuts, emergency rationing, and even temporary shutdowns in some districts. People wake up to find their taps dry for hours, sometimes entire neighborhoods going without water as authorities try to stretch the remaining supply. At the center of the crisis is extreme drought. Iran has faced below average rainfall for several years, but this year's numbers were shocking. In some regions, rainfall dropped by more than half. Snowpack, which normally feeds the reservoirs in spring and summer, barely formed. When the hot season began earlier than expected, the entire system came under enormous stress. Tehran, a city with over 9 million residents and millions more commuting daily, depends heavily on predictable snowmelt. Without it, the reservoirs simply couldn't refill. The descent to empty levels happened faster than water authorities imagined. But drought alone doesn't tell the full story. Iran's water use system is built on decades, old policies that no longer match the reality of today's climate. Water-intensive agriculture consumes the largest share of Iran's water resources, even in provinces that are chronically dry. Outdated irrigation methods and political pressure to keep farms running have drained aquifers that once served as backup supplies. As those aquifers collapse, land subsidence becomes another irreversible issue, further reducing the ability of the ground to hold water meaningfully. Tehran's water infrastructure has been warning of collapse for years, but the response has mostly been temporary patches, not structural reform. As Tehran now enters this emergency phase, the government has implemented what it calls controlled distribution. In simple terms, that means areas will experience planned water cuts for several hours at a time. Some districts, especially those located at higher elevations, see even longer interruptions because water pressure cannot reach them when the system is running low. Social media is filled with videos of residents carrying buckets, filling bottles, and storing as much water as they can whenever flow returns. What once sounded like distant fears has become a daily survival routine. In the midst of the crisis, public frustration is rising. Many citizens blame decades of poor planning and overconfidence by officials. The government has responded by urging people to conserve water as a national duty. But at the same time, critics argue that everyday citizens are paying the price for structural failures far outside their control. Many Tehran residents say they already use the minimum amount of water possible, and that the real issue is mismanagement of reservoirs, deteriorating pipelines, and failure to modernize Iran's water policy. Videos show long lines at public water distribution points, and in some areas, private water trucks have started appearing, at a cost many can't afford. Industries in and around Tehran are also feeling the impact. Factories that rely heavily on water have had to scale back operations, share resources, or in some cases shut down temporarily. Without consistent water supply, production becomes unpredictable, leading to financial losses and job instability. Some industrial zones have appealed to officials for emergency access to alternative water sources, but with the entire region under pressure, there is only so much the government can do. The ripple effects of the crisis are spreading into the economy. As the situation worsened, schools, hospitals, and public institutions began taking their own emergency precautions. Some schools have shortened operating hours to reduce water consumption. Hospitals, often strained during Iran's frequent heat waves, must maintain essential water availability, something that requires constant coordination with authorities to avoid life-threatening shortages. Even Tehran's famous bazaars and shopping areas are struggling, with businesses forced to close temporarily when water is cut without warning. In many homes, the crisis has changed daily life dramatically. Housewives speak of rationing every drop, using stored water for cooking, and skipping non-essential cleaning. People with elderly parents or infants worry about hygiene and health issues that arise when water becomes unreliable. There is fear of rising illnesses due to poor sanitation, especially during hot spells. For those living in older apartment buildings, the problem is even worse. Many structures rely on rooftop tanks that need consistent pressure to refill. When the pressure drops, the tanks remain empty, leaving entire buildings without water. Another layer to the crisis is political tension. Some citizens accuse the government of downplaying the severity of the situation in earlier months. Officials claim the crisis was unpredictable, caused by climate patterns outside their control. Environmentalists and water researchers strongly disagree. They argue that Iran's water crisis is man-made as much as climate-made, pointing to decades of unsustainable policies. This includes overbuilding dams that altered natural river flow, excessive drilling of wells, and allowing agriculture to expand into areas that could never support such consumption long term. The crisis has sparked debate about Iran's long-term survival strategies. Some experts warn that without radical reform, major cities could face repeat day zero threats in the coming years. They call for a shift in how water is used, stored, and managed. This includes investing in water-efficient agriculture, repairing aging pipelines that lose enormous amounts of water through leakage, and adopting technologies like desalination in coastal regions to reduce pressure on inland reserves. However, implementing these changes requires massive funding, something Iran struggles with due to sanctions and economic constraints. As for ordinary Tehran residents, the present concern is simply getting through each day. People are reorganizing their schedules around water availability. Businesses adjust their hours. Restaurants and cafes temporarily close in neighborhoods hit hardest by shortages. Social gatherings, weddings, and public events are being canceled or downsized because organizers cannot guarantee access to water. The psychological toll is heavy. Water is more than a resource. It's a basic foundation of daily life. When it becomes unpredictable, anxiety becomes part of the routine. Despite the difficulty, some communities in Tehran are finding ways to help each other. Neighbors share stored water with those who didn't manage to fill enough containers. Local volunteers distribute bottled water to vulnerable households. Apartment residents coordinate group purchases of water tanks and filtration systems. While these efforts provide temporary relief, They highlight how deeply the crisis has disrupted normal life. Meanwhile, the environment around Tehran is also showing signs of stress. The once flowing rivers that pass through the capital have shrunk to trickles or dried completely. Wildlife that depended on these water bodies is disappearing. The city has experienced more dust storms as dry land becomes exposed, worsening air quality in an already polluted urban region. These environmental shifts are not temporary. They reflect long-term degradation that will be hard to reverse. International observers are closely watching Iran's situation because it mirrors a larger global issue. Many regions around the world are facing increasing water scarcity due to climate change, population growth, and mismanagement. Tehran's crisis is a stark example of what can happen when warnings are not taken seriously. As countries confront similar risks, Iran stands as a case study in the consequences of delayed action. The lessons from this crisis could influence water management strategies far beyond the Middle East. Iran's leadership insists that emergency measures will stabilize the situation. Authorities have proposed short-term solutions such as water imports, deeper well drilling, and temporary restrictions. However, many experts warn that these actions may only push the crisis down the road without solving the root causes. The lack of sustainable planning means Tehran could face repeated cycles of water scarcity, each more intense than the last. Without significant reform, the capital's growing population will continue fighting for a resource that becomes increasingly scarce. As the crisis continues, discussions about migration are rising. Some families are considering moving to northern regions of Iran, where water scarcity is less severe. Others talk about leaving the country altogether. Large-scale migration due to water stress is something researchers have warned about for years. If Tehran's crisis worsens, these discussions may turn into a reality, reshaping Iran's demographic map. One of the most troubling aspects of the crisis is the impact on Tehran's poorest residents. While wealthier neighborhoods can purchase water tanks, filtration systems, or deliveries from private suppliers, lower-income families cannot. They rely entirely on government supply schedules, making them the most vulnerable. For these families, a prolonged water cut is not just an inconvenience. It directly threatens their health, hygiene, and daily survival. As tension grows, so does public scrutiny. Citizens demand transparency, asking officials to release accurate data about reservoir levels and consumption patterns. Rumors circulate online, with some claiming the reservoirs are even lower than the government admits. Others argue that political priorities have delayed essential interventions. In times of crisis, trust becomes fragile, and managing public confidence is as important as managing the resource itself. Through all this, one question remains: how did one of the region's biggest and most historically important cities end up here? The answer lies in a combination of changing weather patterns, decades of over-extraction, outdated infrastructure, and delayed decision-making. Tehran's water meltdown is not a sudden accident. It is the outcome of years of cumulative stress, and now the city must confront the consequences. Looking ahead, Iran must make difficult choices. Water reform often clashes with political interests, economic priorities, and social expectations. Reducing agricultural water use may anger farmers. Increasing investment in modern infrastructure requires funds Iran doesn't easily have. Enforcing conservation rules risks backlash from citizens already frustrated. But without decisive action, the alternative is far worse. A future where water shortages become permanent, and cities like Tehran face recurring shutdowns. For now, Tehran's people must endure the immediate reality. They live with water stored in buckets, jugs, and plastic containers. They monitor schedules, adjust routines, and hope each day that supply will return on time. They try to stay patient as officials work on emergency measures, and they wonder what the next month will bring, because the end of this crisis is still not in sight. In the coming weeks, the situation in Tehran will likely remain tense. Authorities may announce new restrictions, reroute water from other regions, or impose stricter conservation rules. Residents will continue navigating uncertainty. The battle to stabilize the system has begun, but the long path to restoring true water security will take far more than emergency responses. It will require rebuilding a system from the ground up. This is the story of Iran's water meltdown, a crisis that has pushed a nation's capital into emergency mode and exposed vulnerabilities built up over decades. What happens next will shape Tehran's future for years to come. As the reservoirs run dry, Iran must face a difficult truth. Survival in the future depends on decisions made today. If you found this explanation helpful and want more deep dives like this, make sure to stay connected. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.